self-worth at 44, 43, 44. But that's how long it took for me to feel like my truth mattered, that anyone would care about my truth, anyone would want to listen or be interested in it. And the more I started on my journey to worthy, the more I was like, I got to tell other people. And then again, I had to also not just be ready to write the book, but be ready to do a press tour and a book tour where I could be honest and have real conversations.
The New York Times bestseller, okay, so she can sign it afterwards, all right? But you go there with a lot of things. I want to first start with you grew up in Pleasanton.
Yeah.
Oh,
are you
East Bay, San Ramon.
Okay. East Bay. Okay. Didn't
I did not expect to hear cheer when I said Pleasanton. Just to put it out there. But you grew up in Pleasanton. You talk a lot about in the book about being basically the only black girl in the city.
The chip and the cookie.
The chip and the cookie. How do you think just that experience of being, you know, the only black face in a white space impacted you as you grew up, as you grew older, the person you are now?
The feeling of being constantly surveilled, but at the same time invisible, is a very bizarre space to be in. Now in my life, I'm used to being surveilled and dissected and profiled, usually for good things, but not always. But the feeling of being invisible and the feeling of being othered, the feeling like nothing you say or do matters, while at the same time everything you say and do matters. It's being like an invisible Rosa Parks. We need you to be a pillar of your race and do everything right, but we're also not going to give you credit for doing anything right. It's a weird space, and it creates a lot of rage and a lot of resentment, a lot of feelings of betrayal. Really re-examining friendships and were they friendships in a sense of what that word means. And you learn to either use your voice or forever hold your peace. And I recognize that forever holding your peace is a cosign for there's kids here, the effery. And I just stopped being okay with that.
So how did you deal with that rage? How did you deal with that discomfort? Did you put it into work? Did you know?
I was just an angry, bitter, mean-spirited person who communicated through misery. Other people's pain was my social currency. You come to me if you want me to read somebody. I will read you for filth twice and not think twice about it. I was just a wounded, hurt person who smiled a lot out of, self-defense, a defense mechanism. So I'm sure it was strangely confusing for those growing up with me. She seems so nice. Because I cut it. You're constantly vacillating between trying to fully assimilate, because that's what they tell you. As long as you price yourself out of poverty and lower socioeconomic group issues, as long as you pull your pants up and pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you get straight A's, and as long as you do X, Y, and Z, then we'll give you the love, then we'll give you the attention. So you do that, and you're like, okay. So you either become super Negro or you don't exist.
Right. You speak in the book about being sexually assaulted while you were younger. You were working at Payless. Somebody came in, basically robbed the place and raped you. But you talk about how it took you a long time to move from victim to survivor. Talk to us a little bit more about that. Like, how did you move through that?
Well, first of all, a lot of people are very comfortable with victims. We love a victim. And I call it my cloak of victimhood. So we will give you a pass for life. You ever been to somebody's funeral and they died at like 88 and they're like, well, you know, she used to sing opera. But then there was that situation in 63. And now she's dead. But we're okay with a lifetime of pain that renders you immobile. And so we will always give that more attention for a lifetime. And I was okay with that attention for a long time, until I wasn't. And I didn't want my rape to define me. And I was tired of the pitying looks. They went from comforting to, I felt like I was shrinking and disappearing. And I'd had enough. And so I started taking therapy seriously. I channeled so much of my grief and my rage and my shame, guilt into school books. But it's a lifetime journey. You know, there's days where I'm like, today I'll be under the bed with a bottle or case or box of wine. Call me on Thursday. I cannot today. And I want the, oh baby, oh, and, you know, but I'm trying to make those moments and not a lifetime. But it was so important for me once I got the therapy and I started to heal and I started to use my voice and I became an activist for sexual assault victims, survivors, that I tell that story. A lot of us are like, and I'm healed! And you can too, for the local price. And it's like, and then we speak in weird cliches, but we don't actually tell people what rock bottom looks like. We don't tell people every step it took to even get to the therapist's door. We don't tell people how hard it is in therapy to face yourself. You know, how oftentimes, we are the common denominator for our own issues. We are the managers of our misery. That's hard. And a lot of people are like, I'm going to skip that part. And I'm tired of skipping that part.
Were there any stories that you put into the book or experiences you put in the book that you initially weren't sure about putting in there?
Well, I don't know, for those of you who have read it, I talk about my father's infidelity. And I talk about my own infidelity. And turns out you can ruin Thanksgiving talking about your father's infidelity with his new wife. Apparently, that's awkward. So that was weird and unfortunate. And I was rightfully anxious about putting that in there. Everything I feared actually happened. But it also forced people to be accountable, you know? And to recognize every action has a reaction, and just because you say you're sorry doesn't mean the pain and our experiences dissipate. It just means you're acknowledging your stuff. But then sharing that with the world. He was like, what am I going to do at the barber shop? And I'm like, Dad, first of all, I doubt the old men in the barber shop who are in their 70s are reading my book. And I've never even seen a scene in a barber shop where men were like, you cheated on your wife, you're a terrible man. I doubt she had it coming. I'm sure she was perfect in every way, and you're a terrible, terrible person. I'm like, if it comes up, Dad, I'm sure there possibly will be a high five involved. I doubt they will nail you to the cross. And then talking about my own infidelity. I think people are much more comfortable, again, with me being a victim of infidelity than being like, you too. Didn't see that coming. And talking about a complicated relationship with sexuality. Again, feelings of worthlessness that led me into a terrible first marriage. The power inequity in that first marriage, and just the terrible mistakes all around that we all made. It was a much easier chapter to write when I was just talking about him and his stuff. And then in the back of my mind, I could see us back in therapy where I was lying to the therapist because I wanted her to like me. And his face would be like, "We're supposed to be here to get help, and you're lying." So I couldn't write the book if I wasn't going to tell the whole story. And part of my journey is, it includes my father's infidelity, my mother's reaction, my grandparents' reaction, the community's reaction. All of that goes into the woman I am today and the choices that I made.
And the book, it's written so candidly. One of the things that I kind of was surprised to read was you talking very openly about your career and some of the issues you face being a Black woman in Hollywood. And one of the things you mentioned is how Hollywood is segregated.
Yeah.
How that is one of the reasons why it can be so difficult for Black folks, generally speaking, to get up. Talk to us a little bit about that. You spoke about how even if the parties are different parties.
So there's a phrase, Black Hollywood, just like there's a phrase Black Twitter. In my industry, if you become friends with who you're in the audition room with. So, and generally, when they cast a role, if it's smart lawyer, I wouldn't be in that room. Sassy best friend, it's me and every other Black girl. And so that's who I got to know, and that becomes your community. And then the parties, where you basically hire the people in your social group, but if our social groups are not truly integrated and inclusive, people are going to just keep hiring people who look like them. We're going to end up doing projects with people who look like us, and it will remain segregated. And I talk about in the book that Prince was an amazing man in every sense of the word, not just a musical genius, but he truly believed in inclusive art. That art isn't really art if it's not inclusive. And he would throw these wild, amazing parties that literally looked like the United Nations, where creatives, writers, directors, playwrights, composers, actors, athletes, everyone would be in the same space, allowing each other to actually get to know each other. To then be like, remember when we were in line at the bathroom? We had that bad tuna at Prince's house. You want to come work? I'm like, and because that's how Hollywood works. But if the parties are segregated, we can't even party together. Work. Good luck with that. Just recently, I went on vacation with a friend of mine, Olivia Munn, who's also a best-selling author, and they did a whole article on how is Gabrielle Union and Olivia Munn, how are they friends? Well, we met like normal people on Twitter because we like dogs. But if there's articles about how are these people even friends, much less how did they get on vacation together, we have so much work to do. Or we're both actresses that love work with friends and pets and books. And there's so many things that are common places that we could all intersect, but we actively there's forces that actively keep us separate and lacking and silent. Except it's over. Time has been up.
Yes.
And the water's warm and we're all cannonballing in and we're saying, F your table. I don't even want to sit at your table. We built a new house and it's inclusive. Everybody's welcome. Come be great over here.
Before we open it up to the audience for questions, there's one last thing in the book that I want to highlight. Black bombs.
Yes.
You talk about black bombs. Explain for us what are black bombs and why you find them important, particularly raising black boys.
In raising black children, these are conversations that you have to have with your children to arm them moving out in the world when they are not physically in your presence, so you can whoop somebody's butt if they mess with your child. My dad always told me that you have to be bigger, badder, better just to be considered maybe equal. Your A is not going to be looked at in the same way. You better be not just early and overly prepared. You better have answers to the question and the follow-up question and the follow-up to the follow-up question. Just so they think that you might be worthy of your space. When I tell my boys, when they walk the dog, these are actual conversations that we actually have with our children. We walk the dog down our street in Miami because we live in an open carry, standard ground state. My neighbors can kill my kids and get away with it. Loop one finger around the leash and keep the rest of your fingers spread so they don't think that you're holding anything. If they stop you, and I'm raising children of privilege with white children of privilege, so they want to react the way that their friends react. Their friends who are called assertive and leaders for them being assertive and challenging a teacher, or challenging authority, or standing up for what's right. Whereas my children are called aggressive and bullies and troublemakers, and they're going to be disciplined differently. So in those moments, I gotta arm them with how it really goes down. You come home to me and I'll handle it, but I need you to come home first, and this is how you do that. So I gotta drop these black bombs on them. So when you're walking the dog, 10 houses down to the Bosch's house, you don't put your hands in your pocket. You keep those fingers spread. You keep the leash linked around one finger. And if they stop you, you say, I'm Dwayne Wade's child. Number 3, 3-time champion of Miami Heat. We'll work it the rest out. Somebody will get fired later, but come home safe first. But now, you see a 14-year-old child lost, knocks on a neighbor's door, firefighter, neighbor's a firefighter. He shoots at the kid. I didn't even think to have that black bomb, because my inclination would be, if you're lost, go up to a kind neighbor and ask for help. Never occurred to me that they might try to kill my child. Or just run into a Starbucks real quick. That's off the table. They called Starbucks 2 minutes after those men came in, asking for the bathroom. These are the black bombs. So when people say you're over-exaggerating, you're overly sensitive, you're doing a child a disservice, I just need my kid to come home and we'll work the rest out. We can have this conversation later. But our kids aren't coming home to have the conversation. So that's why it's necessary. I talk about it in the book.
That's why y'all should buy the book. It's so good. Okay, we're going to open it up to questions. I think there are microphones.
Don't be shy. Don't be shy.
I've got one in the middle here.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Gabrielle.
Hi.
My name is Lynn. This isn't to be putting me down or whatever like that, but
Put it, come on.
because my kid is brown sugar like you, okay? So, and my daughter went through the same thing like you. When she goes out the country by herself, it's a whole different thing than when she would go out of the country with her white partner. But my thing is, since you and Dwayne live in these kind of areas, I know it's good if you're not in the ghetto to stay there, okay? Move out. But why stay in that kind of area where you're just as much fear as you would be in the ghetto? So is there some kind of place you guys can go in between? Why put your kids through that? You have to keep training your kids and have this kind of fear or look out about everything. God is your leader. He's the one who's going to protect you either way. You don't have to be in the ghetto.
I just like to help him.
Yeah, you want to help him.
I like to help Jesus on occasion.
You're helping him, but you got to make sure about the kids, how they're feeling inside.
That's why we send our children 45 minutes away to school in a diverse school. And by diverse, I'm not talking about a sprinkle. I'm talking about 30% black children. Yeah, no, because we can't have them in that community. I wasn't going to do to my kids what my parents did to me. You're saving us. You've made it. You've achieved the American dream, and your children are surveilled or erased. And I couldn't do that. So between my husband and I, finding a community that was safe was one issue. Finding a school community that was truly inclusive and not just racially inclusive, but also had a notable LGBTQ community that truly embraced every member of South Florida. But we also, listen, our village is wide and vast. So we are, our kids are on the north side of Omaha and the south side of Chicago, and not the cute part of Mesa, because they got to understand how the real world is, and it's not a block. They have a better chance of surviving on the south side of Chicago than on the most exclusive streets in Miami Beach. And that's just our reality. Yeah. That's not a quick time. That's a great question.
Your question over to the left. You got one? Okay, you got one right here in the front.
Yes, sir.
Hi. Thank you first for being Mary Jane. I think as a character that I think I see myself a lot in, and thank you. I'm gonna need therapy now that it's. And thank you. I've read the book, and thank you for writing so candidly. So, as a fellow gay Latino, I have to ask you about Ray and your relationship and that scenario that you explained of your friendship developing. That's a very real scenario that happened. We're a few years apart, and I was in the Bay Area while you were there as a student at Berkeley, and dealing with a lot of that stuff with my girlfriends as well. So I like that you were so honest in explaining how that evolved. And in particular, if you could talk about your relationship with him, but also, I'm slightly obsessed and very fortunate to have met Lena Waithe, and they. Okay, so right. We could talk forever about her. I'm fortunate to have met her through friends and colleagues and work stuff. So when she said that Emmy speech about the world is not as beautiful without you in it, and she was talking to our community, the camera happened to pan to you. I've seen that speech probably a dozen times. It gives me chills. It gives me, it's a perfect speech. She delivered it perfectly. It was very powerful. But when it panned to you, it became that much more powerful. And I think your emotion in that moment really struck a chord with me, because you could see your support. And after reading the book, so I wanted to ask, did you talk to Ray after that moment, or if you could just...
Well, I talk to Ray all the time. So we cover everything from Beyonce last week in Coachella to the speech and everything in between. He's grateful that I was accountable. He's grateful that I talked about not being an ally to how I became an ally. I think it's cute when people are like, and I'm an ally. Are you really? Always. Are you really? Even when it's tough. Even when you gotta check your privilege and shut up. So he was grateful that I told the truth and that I didn't rewrite history, and that I was just freaking accountable. And I try to call as many people to the carpet collectively to challenge, what kind of friend are we really? Do our friendships have limits, provided you fit into every box that we've decided that you should fit into? Or are we gonna love you how you were created and how you are blossoming and how your soul wants to shine? And a lot of times is, oh no, I'm only your friend provided you do exactly what I want you to do. I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't ever really want to have to fight for you in any sort of real way that challenges or puts my privilege in question. Most of us just want to, sort of assimilate. And being an active and open ally creates a bigger target. And some of us are built for that, and some of us aren't. And I hadn't been built for that, and I am now built for that. But part of that was finding my own self-worth to see his self-worth. that just like I was worthy from birth, he was worthy when he was an idea. But most of us aren't really ever honest about that. And Lena, who's become a very good friend, I'm just incredibly proud. And in that moment, there's so many family members and so many of my best friends who are still living in fear of rejection, fear of our community, especially communities of color, religious communities, fear that they will be put out, fear that they will go unloved, fear that they will go unsupported, and so they stay silent and they stay in the shadows. And not just that speech, but she did a speech at Essence, where she was like, come out wherever you are. And every time she opens her mouth, I'm like, yes! Oh, okay. Let me live tweet the shot. She's just such an important voice, and in that moment, she was just shining for so many people who are in darkness. And I think we all needed it. Oh, okay. I'm not going to gush and gag over you. You are the cutest thing ever.
So, what if you get a different book? Can you still get your autograph?
Yes. Yes. You can have whatever you want. You're good.
A question to your right.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello. So I was just wondering, like, how do you think that we can combat stereotypes placed upon Black women and like diffuse like positive messages about Black women into communities that aren't just Black, so we can have a more inclusive community as a whole?
The easiest way is through social media, and living your best life, so people know that we're not one group that does one thing, that we don't submit to groupthink, that we're all individuals. And we can have a show like Seinfeld about nothing. We can have a coming-of-age story about, a Black girl in Sacramento who's got kind of a naggy mom, and, maybe have that be up for awards. We are Wakanda, and we are Thurgood Marshall, and we are Atlanta, and we're 1,000 billion things in between. But it's really us living out loud and proud and living our best lives and posting it. And so, social media is shrinking the world. So I'm finding inspiration on the streets of Bangladesh through social media for New York and Company that sold in Tuscaloosa. You know what I mean? People, we need to be our best selves wherever we are, whether you have 2 followers or 50 million. You thriving is combating that. You know what I mean? You living out loud, unapologetically. And here I am. And hopefully your stories, your life, your friends' lives, your family lives creates art that we can put on a massive stage. And anytime one of us gets a microphone, we live unapologetically in our space.
We're midway down yet.
Yes.
Hi, Gabrielle.
Hi.
I know that you're filming a pilot for the Bad Boys spinoff.
Yes.
So can we expect that on TV screen and a working title?
Well, the title is LA's Finest. No pressure, NBC, total pressure, NBC. We would like to see it on NBC this fall. It's the first thing from my production deal with Sony, my television production deal with Sony. Yeah. And I was like, I need a woman of color. I want, Jessica Alba, she has $1 billion company in her spare time. She just gave birth to her 3rd child and she's breastfeeding on set, because that's how we do it. We can multitask, we can be any and everything. That's how we combat stereotypes. We live our truth, we live out and proud, we put other people on, we finally get a chance to employ people. We share the microphone, you know what I mean? But yeah, so that's the goal. NBC, feel free to pressure them. They got a decision to make very soon. But I'm incredibly proud of it, no matter what. I left my blood, sweat, and tears on that stage, so hopefully everyone will get to see our work.
Question down front.
I'm Gabrielle. I've been a fan of yours since I saw Love and Basketball, but I feel like I have to ask a juicy question.
Juicy.
How do you keep a straight face or keep your composure, especially when you're making those naughty, raunchy scenes with these good-looking guys?
Wow. I'd like to think, how do they keep their composure? I'm 45, I've been kissing boys for a long time. Unlike Marilyn Chambers on the set, I'm like, come on! It's not gonna help, let's get to it! So I try to keep it light and jerky as possible, while having, clear boundaries. It's more of their idea of how my husband is going to react to it. Like, at any one moment, he's gonna be like, that's, I think, probably a bigger concern for the dudes. Than, I'm like, whatever, another day at the office. Hello, Morris Chestnut. Hello, Michael Ely. Will Smith, good day to you, sir.
Have a question?
Yes.
Hi, thank you for joining us. I just want to give you FYI, 96.90 heat down with 4:30 left.
Wait, say the score again?
96.90.
96.90.
Sixers are up with 4:37 left.
That means my husband's in. We got some time.
I also wanted to ask you, I haven't seen too much of being Mary Jane, so I'm not really good on a follow-up question. But I know there's a lot of hard-hitting topics on the show. So I was wondering, how involved are you in the creative process for deciding what the show delves into?
Since season 3, I've been an executive producer on the show, so very involved. Some of the storylines are from my life. The infidelity bits are from, my relationships. The infertility, that's my life. We put that in the book. Some of the complicated family relationships, feeling like, Mary Jane's the sole support of a lot of adult people. That's from my life, but also really examining on Mary Jane's show some of the topics I wish we could speak about, our journalists could speak about uneditedly. So I try to create the reality I hope to see on CNN and MSNBC and headline news and our local news. Sometimes art imitates life, and sometimes it does not. But this season, Mary Jane's going to have natural hair, and she's not wearing her girdle, and she's still magically able to deliver the news. I hope that's yes.
Question over here to your right.
Hi, Gabrielle. Thank you so much for coming. So I kind of move aside from your show and talk about the Me Too movement in Hollywood. Being an insider, we're hearing so much positive reactions and positive changes, but what do you think is kind of the downfall or some things that are missing in this movement, and do you see it kind of really progressing and really eliciting real change in Hollywood?
I think there's real change in Hollywood happening for some people, and I think that there are still voices from marginalized communities, specifically communities of color, the Black community in particular, Latino, Asian communities, Muslim communities, Native communities, LGBTQ communities, where our pain does not seem to translate into changes in legislation. It doesn't seem to translate into mass reckoning of our perpetrators. Our voices sometimes feel like we're screaming into a hurricane and nobody hears us. So there's that. And we are actively trying to make sure the movement embraces the intersections of all of those communities. That when we speak of, a lot of times we talk about this earlier today, people will say, well, we're really working, hard, for women and women of color. I'm stopping right there, because we're all women. These aren't two separate thoughts, and to ask us to separate our race from our gender you've already lost. You're creating a moment, not a movement. And until you actively and consciously recognize all the intersections that the movement needs to acknowledge, to exist, and to affect real change, I can only be a part of the tomfoolery and the hoodwinking, but for so long. Before no, ma'am, not today. So what we're not going to do is prioritize some voices. So as long as I have voice, which you hear it's starting to go, I will be screaming for marginalized communities whose voices have been silenced and erased, to make sure everyone's pain is not tolerated. You know what I mean? We seem to have a higher tolerance for black and brown pain. And we've also, some of our perpetrators are quite famous and still selling tickets to concerts. Because do we prioritize black girls? Young black women? Oh no, that's right, their pain is big. Y'all good. Y'all are strong black women. Forever. Forever and ever and ever. And
all right, I think we have time for two more questions. I know I've got a guy back here.
Hello. How you doing?
Hi.
First off, at the end of this, I need you to stop to booth 168 if you can. My auntie's over there doing a book signing. Second off,
but who's your auntie? You gotta give.
Ken Wells. Ken Wells is somewhere over here.
Ken Wells.
Ken Wells.
Yeah.
But secondly, I'm friends with Megan Good. She's the one that had you do that video for Stephon Clark in Sacramento.
Yes.
I went to school with him. We're from Sacramento. It's my cousin right here. We just want to thank you because that was like big. It just shows like we're from a small city. We have a lot of potential. The whole city has potential, but no one could even have fathomed seeing someone like Gabrielle Union speak on just SAC. You know what I'm saying? Like that's really powerful. So I want to thank you.
No.
See, I'm shaking a little bit. I want to thank you on behalf of SAC, on behalf of all the people, and you. And shout out to you, LA's finest. I see you doing it with Dwayne. I worked under him for a while. I'm just getting my little plug in, but thank you. I appreciate it.
No, a city like Sacramento, I grew up going to SAC for a lot of shenanigans. And if I could cruise Florin Road, I can. I can also give back to the community and recognize that every citizen in Chicago, Sacramento, Tuscaloosa, Biloxi, North Side Omaha, all of our lives matter. We all deserve a chance to raise our kids. Our kids deserve a chance to grow up. And if I can't take 2 seconds to record a video telling the family of Stephon Clark how sorry I am and how we're not going to stop fighting for him, what have I done? What have I really accomplished? Not a damn thing. So, thank you.
Okay, one final question over here on your record.
Hi, Gabrielle. I'm Mia. Along with Quincy behind me, we're going to be the co-directors of Black Student Assembly at USC. And I wanted to ask you about integration, how you're talking about inclusivity, but I find the hardest part about integrating the Black community with the rest of the campus is that when you have a long day at school and all the books and homework and everything, you don't want to come home to microaggressions, and that's really hard to deal with when you're creating an inclusive campus. So how do you deal with that in Hollywood, and how can we apply that on campus?
So we're still working on that. But precisely that, we're struggling. So many of us are underemployed. So much of our work is not getting the recognition or even the platform. We're not even getting out the gates. So then in our spare time, we're supposed to be the super Negro that is going to educate the masses, help massage and wipe away the tears that I don't get why you're crying. I'm crying. Why are you crying? But it's exhausting. It's necessary. And I don't believe that we should have to educate in this day and age of Google. So I'm quick to be like, that's what Google's for. I'm sure there's an Encyclopedia Britannica somewhere in your home. You could look up some of these questions, and you don't have to burden your Black friends and allies and coworkers and fellow students with basic questions that you could Google. But when it comes time to studying, we're all in the same class. We can pool our resources. I don't know, at USC I went to your crosstown rival, is it UCLA? We have lecture notes. I don't know if they still have lecture notes. You can share lecture. It just starts with I'm struggling with finite mathematics. Are you? Apparently our whole class is failing. Perhaps we can get together. And sometimes it just takes a bit of personal discomfort on everybody's part to just take a step towards the next person. It sucks. It can cause a lot of rage and a lot of resentment. I'm there a lot of times, and sometimes I'm just too tired. Like, not today. And then I regroup, and I'm like, I'm not getting any further if I don't take this time and say, we all want to be better human beings. We're all trying to heal. We're all trying to get through something. We are all struggling to feel worthy. Let's figure this out together. But don't say anything stupid and don't.
Ladies and gentlemen, Gabrielle. Interviewed, of course, by Gabrielle Anderson. Now, if you'd like to buy a copy of the book, you can do so right behind me. There's the main stage signing area. You can buy a copy of the book right there, and then bring it to the back half of the tent and get it signed right there. That's Romans in the front, signing in the back.